In 1981, a stone figurine carved roughly 25,000 years ago was re-examined by researchers who noticed something everyone had somehow missed for decades. The Venus of Willendorf, one of the oldest known human sculptures on Earth, has no face, no feet, no detail on the hands. But the parts of the body linked to fertility and sexuality are carved with obsessive, exaggerated precision. Whoever made this wasn't trying to capture what a person looked like. They were trying to capture what mattered to them. And that single artifact opens up a question that sounds almost too strange to take seriously. Did the very first humans actually experience sexual pleasure the way we understand it today? Or is the orgasm itself a surprisingly recent invention of evolution? Let's start with the part that should make you sit up a little. Biologically speaking, the female orgasm has been one of the most argued over mysteries in evolutionary science, and not because anyone doubts it exists, because nobody can fully agree on why it exists. Unlike the male orgasm, which is directly tied to ejaculation and therefore obviously useful for reproduction, the female orgasm doesn't need to happen for conception to occur. That single fact has fueled one of the strangest academic debates in modern biology. In 2005, evolutionary biologist Elizabeth Lloyd published a book examining over 20 competing theories, and her conclusion was almost anticlimactic. She argued the female orgasm might not be an adaptation at all. It might be what scientists call a developmental byproduct, essentially a side effect of shared embryonic tissue. Every human starts development with the same basic genital structure before differentiating, and the clitoris is, on a cellular level, related to the same tissue that becomes the head of the penis. Her argument was that female orgasm exists for the same reason men have nipples. Not because it does anything useful, but because the underlying blueprint is shared, and evolution never bothered to remove it. Naturally, this did not end the debate. Other researchers pushed back hard. One competing idea, sometimes called the pair bonding hypothesis, argues that the intense neurochemical reward of orgasm flooding the brain with oxytocin and dopamine existed specifically to strengthen emotional attachment between partners. In a species where children take over a decade to become self-sufficient, anything that glues two parents together for longer than a single mating event has a serious survival advantage. A baby that starves because its parents drifted apart after one encounter doesn't pass on genes. A baby raised by two bonded parents has a much better shot. Then there's a theory that sounds almost conspiratorial, proposed by anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy. She studied primates where females mate with multiple males in a short window and noticed something interesting. In species with high rates of infanticide by unrelated males, females who appeared to experience pleasure with multiple partners created paternity confusion. If a male can't be sure a baby isn't his, he's far less likely to kill it. Under this theory, female sexual pleasure didn't evolve to reward monogamy. It evolved as a survival strategy that protected offspring by making fatherhood ambiguous on purpose. So which theory is correct? Genuinely, we don't fully know, but here's where it gets even more interesting. We're not the only species where this happens. Female bonobos have been observed engaging in what researchers describe as orgasmic responses during both heterosexual and homosexual encounters, often using it as a social bonding tool completely separate from reproduction. Female Japanese macaques display physiological signs consistent with orgasm during mating. Dolphins, who are remarkably anatomically equipped for it, appear to engage in sexual behavior purely for pleasure on a regular basis. If pleasure-driven sexuality this complex exists across multiple unrelated branches of the animal kingdom, it's unlikely to be some accidental glitch unique to humans. Something about it keeps getting selected for again and again independently. Now let's go back to the archaeology, because this is where ancient humans stop being abstract and start looking a lot like us. The Venus figurines aren't isolated. Cave art across Europe, dating back over 30,000 years, includes depictions that anthropologists widely interpret as explicitly sexual, alongside hunting scenes and animal art. This wasn't hidden or shameful material. It was carved and painted in communal spaces, suggesting sexuality wasn't treated as something to bury in secrecy. It was simply part of life, recorded the same way they recorded the animals they hunted and the fires they built. Written history backs this up even more directly. The Turin erotic papyrus, created in ancient Egypt around 1150 BC, depicts a series of explicit scenes that have led some historians to describe it as one of the oldest known pieces of erotic art with a clear narrative structure. Ancient Sumerian texts go even further. Hymns dedicated to the goddess Inanna, some of the oldest written literature in human history, describe sexual pleasure in surprisingly direct and celebratory language framed not as taboo but as something sacred enough to be addressed to a deity. These weren't whispered secrets, they were temple texts. So if the evidence stretches back through Egypt, through Sumer, through tens of thousands of years of cave art, and possibly through the shared evolutionary history of multiple primate species, the real twist isn't whether ancient humans experienced orgasms. It's that the capacity for sexual pleasure might be older than humans themselves, older than language, possibly older than the genus Homo. What changed isn't the biology. What changed is how openly different cultures chose to talk about it, carve it, write it, or bury it under layers of shame that, historically speaking, are a remarkably recent addition. The Venus of Willendorf was carved 25,000 years before anyone invented the concept of censoring a body. Somewhere between then and now, something about how we relate to that ancient instinct quietly shifted. The body didn't change. The story we tell about it did.